was the Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference in Calgary. I was there. Now, it was about Canada's place in the West. And I'm just going to say this one thing just to get it out of my system. I've been mildly disgruntled about it all weekend. But it was about Canada's place, or sorry, the West's place in Canada. But there are a lot of Easterners there telling us about our place in Canada. I was like, that is the problem with everything right now. But anyway, all that is to say, it was a great conference. Our Premier, Daniel Smith, explained exactly the problems with Confederation and why Albertans are treated unfairly, and the things that could easily happen tomorrow to make things a whole heck of a lot better for those people who think that Canada still deserves a chance. I'm not sure there are a lot of those people left in Alberta anymore, but we also heard good tidings from our friend, oh, there's me. We'll get to that in a bit. We also heard good tidings from our friend Jamil Jivani, who is a Ontario MP, brand new one. And I was really excited to see him because there's nothing that guy won't say about the state of Canada as long as it's true. And, you know, he's ripped on the problems with immigration, the problems with crime, DEI nonsense in our justice system and how it makes people far less safe, the attacks on Christians in Canada, and he calls it for what it is. And on his acceptance speech night, when he won his seat, the first thing he did was rip Doug Ford a new one, because Doug Ford did everything he could to sabotage Pierre Poilievre's Conservative campaign. And he did it to a measure of success, I think, given that we have Mark Carney in the Prime Minister's office. But Jamil let him have it again in front of an audience that was ready to hear it, because I don't know if there are too many Albertans who have any sort of affinity for Doug Ford.
But I would say this is less of an ideological problem and more of a what is the point of politics problem. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. I don't think Doug Ford or the people in his administration believe they have an ideology. I don't believe they have come to a rational conclusion that there's a better way to be a conservative than what I or you would say. In fact, I'm not even sure they would be capable of having a conversation about conservative ideas or principles. What I think is more of the issue is there are people who think the goal of politics is to have power and maintain power for as long as possible at whatever cost is required to pay. And there are people who want to do politics because they believe in certain values or ideas or changes that they would like to create. And to me, that is the difference in Ontario between a lot of the people who are, who are our candidates and myself. I don't want to speak for other people. So I'll say that's the difference between me and the difference between Doug Ford. It's weird when you talk to someone, as you might if you spend time with people in the current incarnation of Ford Nation, and they think that because someone put a good poll out for them, that you're supposed to be happy. Like, oh, you got a good poll. I guess that's good. And not to diminish the fact that that's a reality of our business, like we need to get public support. But if you're popular but you're not doing good things, why am I supposed to be happy about that? Yes. And to be perfectly honest, I also question, whether the negative effect of that is producing more cynicism among our people. Right? If people think politicians don't believe in anything and they're not going to do anything, and regardless of what color your jersey is, you're going to have the same approach to big, important issues, then you're making a lot of people feel like politics isn't even worth getting involved in the first place. You're making a lot of people feel like making the time to vote is not worth it in the first place. And that is my biggest concern among anything as it relates to Doug Ford, is that is what he's doing to our people in Ontario. and ventures to do to our people across the nation, I think, if he had his way. So that is what bothers me, and why I was so amped up on election night is because for weeks and weeks, I had been seeing volunteers putting their effort in to trying to help win this federal election. Kids who've never voted before, single moms making time after her shift to come and knock on doors, people who are giving everything they had. And when they would open up their phones and see stories of the so-called conservative premier of Ontario trashing what we were doing, they felt discouraged. And they deserve someone to speak up for them and tell this guy, I don't care about how, about your theatrics and your stunts. I don't respect you, and I'm going to point it out because I don't like what you're doing to the people who are trying to fight for a better country. That was the point I had to make.
It was nice to hear him say. It was nice to hear him say it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it would have been even better for me to hear it live and in the flesh. What was that like, Sheila?
Oh, it was great. And it was especially great since there was a Doug Ford staffer in the crowd. That was wonderful. I was able to point that out to Jamil afterwards. I'm like, you said that right in front of her. So that was great, but it is exactly true. I'm so glad that, Jamil points out, and you'll notice he didn't even mention like how crappy it was for the party that was working really hard, the MPs that were really working hard for a better, safer Toronto for Doug Ford. But the volunteers, the people who, this is not their job. They don't get paid. They're out there taking time away from their families, their job, door knocking, doing lit drops to try to make their country a better place, to try to undo 10 years of liberal corruption. And Doug Ford was undermining those very volunteers every step of the way. And I'm so glad Jamil pointed that out, because what an insult. And Doug Ford will call upon those same volunteers next time he needs to be reelected.
Yeah,
and they don't come.
And hold on to that reign of power that he seems more concerned with than, as Jamil points out, doing anything good for the world or for the province or for the people of Ontario. And I really appreciated his mention of the fact that how leaders can affect the general population and the public to feel like politics isn't even worth getting into in the first place, right? That's what he said. Getting out to vote doesn't even feel worth it anymore when you have such a milquetoast leader, alleged conservative, but more on the progressive side. And that the proof is in the pudding there. Yep. In this last snap election, 45% of eligible Ontario voters came out to cast a ballot in this election. And that was only 1% higher than what came out in the 2022 election at 43%, which was actually a historic record low voter turnout in Ontario. So it proves his point that Doug Ford isn't doing anything to further or necessitate politics in the province and make it something that people are excited about, they're invigorated about, they want the best leader for the task. Instead, here in Ontario, we're left to pick from the least worst option. Right. And sadly, that's Doug Ford.
Right. And, I'm glad he pointed out, like, what if you asked Doug Ford what conservatism means, I think he'd have a hard time telling you. Like, I think he knows on paper, but in practice, Doug, what are you doing in particular that is indeed conservative? Because I know what Danielle Smith is doing that's conservative. And I know maybe it's not on our list of things, but I was able to okay, first of all, one of the things is she takes plenty of questions from independent media. She realizes that there isn't just one way to do media in this country, and that's the failing way. You could be independent too, and she has all the time in the world for us. I had 2 questions to her, and they were questions that I think every Canadian cares about, but also she comes at them from a conservative viewpoint. So, and I was able to contrast, this is what Doug Ford is doing on issues of crime. What are you doing that's different here? And maybe we can do the crime one first and then the temporary foreign worker one second. Yes. Because Doug Ford said that economic migrants to Ontario, they should be giving work, they should get their work permits faster. And it's like, no, they need to go home. That's what they need to do, because they're taking jobs from young people. Anyways, we'll get to Danielle Smith's response on both of those. Let's do the crime one first. I know it's not on the list, but thank you, Olivia. Says that he wants to add castle doctrine so that homeowners can repel intruders. It looks like party's probably going to oppose it, but prosecutions are provincial decisions, just like when provinces stopped prosecuting marijuana possession. Will you have your Attorney General pledge to not prosecute homeowners who defend their homes and loved ones against break-ins?
That would certainly be my intention, and we've already done that. When you remember the case of Edward Maurice from a few years ago, there was an initial decision that was pursuing prosecution. I think he chose a jury trial, and the Crown realized there was no reasonable likelihood of conviction, so they dropped it. And I think that in the cases that we're now seeing erupt across the country, I would argue it's the same thing. There isn't a jury in the country that will convict somebody if they're defending themselves and their families from an intruder. So I would like to see that a little bit more clear in federal law, but I would say that we've already established that if we can't convict on these kinds of things, that we're not going to pursue them.
So it's a little bit hard to hear because we just have the raw video there and not the produced video there. But I asked her, I said, these prosecutions are a provincial issue. Will you direct your prosecutors to not prosecute Albertans who defend themselves? And she basically points out that we've already done that. You're seeing the proof is in the pudding, that since Eddie Maurice, which I think was in 2019, we have not proceeded with any prosecutions. So in 6 years, Albertans have been free to defend themselves inside their homes. And in 2021, that was really put to the test when a man in Red Deer shot an intruder dead in his home, and it wasn't even close to charged. The RCMP said, perfect, thanks. Basically. And in Ontario right now, we see Doug Ford complaining like, oh, this is garbage. And what are we going to do? And as I said to Jamil Jivani, I hope Doug Ford finds the guy in charge one day.
Yeah. Well, Doug Ford, you could start leading the province out of this mess, maybe make some legislative changes or crack down on policing. And when York Regional Police is up there on their podium telling people to comply with intruders and criminals, perhaps we need a fulsome sweep and clean and sweep of these regimes when that is the kind of advice Canadians, but specifically Ontarians, are receiving from the people who are meant to enforce law and order. It's topsy-turvy, upside-down world business.
We've got one more. Listen up, Calgary. Our Rebel News 10th birthday bash is almost here, and we want you there. But early bird ticket sales end this Monday night at midnight. After that, prices go up, no exceptions. So lock in your spot now for an unforgettable night of fun, food, free speech, and music. And don't worry, Toronto, we didn't forget about you. We've got a birthday bash coming your way in October. Head on over to happybirthdayrebel.com. Grab your tickets today before the deadline passes you by.